The idea of raising pheasants came from Ken's mother, Olive Hook. She knew Ken loved birds and thought there could be a market for pheasants. At the time, Ken and his fiancée, Cathy, were working as seasonal naturalists at Bon Echo Provincial Park. They wanted to continue to live and work in the area, and the pheasant farm idea seemed ideal. Ken and Cathy were recent biology graduates. Both had some farming experience. They put together a proposal to obtain loans from the Bank of Commerce in Tweed and a farm-focused lender, the Farm Credit Corporation. Being non-traditional farming, Farm Credit Corporation was reluctant to give financing unless equity was provided. The Hook family provided the needed equity by supplying all the labor to build the operation. Ken's parents, Richard and Olive Hook, operated Hook's Homes, an electrical and plumbing business in Cloyne, and Ken had 3 brothers who helped. The Farm Credit Corporation loan had an annual interest rate of 9.25%, which at the time was considered very competitive. An operating line of credit was arranged with the CIBC in Tweed. In the late 1970s, the interest rate was 13.5%. It would increase to 22% in the 1980s. In the fall of 1977, construction began on a modest house and a brooder barn. The brooder barn would provide a warm, safe space for day-old chicks to grow for the first 4 weeks.
We wanted to grow pheasants for 2 markets, the live release market and also the gourmet food trade. So we ordered 10,000 day-old chicks from the largest pheasant farm in Canada at the time. That was Uplands Pheasantry, based in Elmer, Ontario. We ordered chicks in 2 lots of 5,000, and we started them on wire. You have to start pheasant chicks on wire for the first 7 days. And then after that, they're moved to the barn floor where they're raised on shavings for another 3 weeks. After that, they're conditioned to the outside environment. Next, we had to build flight pens and conditioning pens outside. All the pens were covered with a huge nylon net because pheasants are good flyers. We stayed 1 step ahead constructing pens as the birds grew larger. Inside the pens, we planted rapeseed, sunflower, oats, and barley to provide cover and supplement the food for the birds. Pheasants eat a lot. It takes over 3 times as much feed to grow a pheasant as compared to a chicken of equal size. It takes 6 weeks to grow a 3-pound chicken, but 18 weeks to grow a 3-pound pheasant. Red automatic bell waters were installed throughout the pheasant pens. The green and white structures were homemade feeders. Over the years, we experimented with different types of feeders. Most of the feed was purchased in bulk. As we grew more pheasants, we added more feed bins and more pens. In 1978, the family built the processing plant. We started with a provincially inspected processing plant. Registration was faster as the requirements were less strict than federal regulations, but it only allowed us to sell within Ontario. Cathy and I had no poultry processing experience. There was a lot of trial and error, but we had a great staff and we learned together.
The provincial plant license was issued in 1978, and we remained a provincial plant up until 1984. The line was not automated, and it was a very slow process. Processing was seasonal from September to December. Because we couldn't offer full-time employment, it was difficult to maintain staff other than our core, which included Bertha Thibault, Joyce Hasser, Judy Reevy, and Joan McCluckey, and others.
By the spring of 1979, the hatchery had been built. A Robbins incubator and hatcher machine were ordered from Colorado with a capacity of 21,000 pheasant eggs. The machines were trucked as far as North Tonawanda, New York, when the Teamsters Union went on strike. Flintshire's breeding hens were starting to lay eggs. The machines were needed. Ken rented a truck and, together with his father and brother Richard, picked up the machines and transported them to Flinton. A technician came from Colorado to install the machines. The incubator precisely maintained the temperature at 99.5 degrees Fahrenheit and the humidity at 50%. The drum turned the eggs every hour, back and forth 45 degrees. Thousands of eggs laid outside by the breeding flock needed to be hand-collected, washed, and sorted 3 times per day. After washing, they were stored in an egg room cooler to slow development until placement in the incubator. Eggs were set in the incubator once a week, with transfer to the hatcher on the 22nd day. Hatching occurred on the 25th day. The hatch rate averaged 75% in the early years. Chicks would be transferred to the brooder barn or placed in cardboard chick boxes for air shipments from Ottawa or Toronto. Upon the hatchery completion in 1979, dependence on the family for construction ended and the first employees were hired.
I worked at a small pheasant operation for 4 months between semesters when I was going to Guelph. And then I worked one summer at a large-scale chicken operation. Cathy also had farm experience when she was at Guelph. Raising pheasants is much more difficult than raising chickens and requires a great deal of space. A general rule of thumb is 20 to 25 square feet per bird. This is 25 times the space needed for a single chicken. Over the years, additional flight pens were built, eventually covering 20 acres of fields. The pheasant market consisted of 2 main markets, live release for hunting and also the gourmet food trade. The largest purchaser of pheasants in Ontario was the Ministry of Natural Resources because they operated provincial wildlife areas, which were hunting areas. These included Brighton, Sibbald Point Provincial Park, Gananoque, and Bronte Creek, and a few others. There was also private hunting clubs that were very large. One that we supplied was Nicholson Island near Wellington and the Griffith Island Hunting Club near Owen Sound. The private hunting clubs purchased thousands of pheasants annually. Getting to the islands was often tricky. Nicholson Island had duck boats for picking up live pheasant on the mainland and transporting them kilometers offshore to the private hunting club island. These were 4- or 6-wheeled amphibious General Motors vehicles used by the U.S. military during World War II. They could drive into the water and on land at the other side, carrying 1,000 pheasants at a time. Griffith Island was formerly the General Motors Hunting Club, and they were a major purchaser too.
For many years, the province of Ontario allowed pheasant hunting in the Gananoque Provincial Wildlife Area and Sibbald Point Provincial Park. In the early 1980s, the pheasant hunting operations were tendered out to private business. Flintshire was awarded the provincial contracts for the Gananoque and Sibbald Point hunting areas for several years. Staff released pheasants, greeted the hunters, and collected the hunting fees. Key staff who operated the gatehouses and assisted with bird releases were Tim Shire and Jason Hook for the Gananoque operation, and Anne and Ray LeBlanc for the Sibbald Point Hunting Preserve. In the early 1980s, the Land O'Lakes Lions in Northbrook had a pheasant hunt as a fundraiser. Lion Peter Rook, former manager of the Brewers Retail in Northbrook, saw an article in Lions magazine about a Lions Club pheasant hunt in California. Peter knew a local source of pheasants for release. The Land O'Lakes Lions Hunt, held in Northbrook and Thomasburg, was a resounding success, attracting hunters from across Ontario and Quebec. The hunt operated over 2 weekends in the fall. The Thomasburg hunt covered 1,500 acres and allowed 75 hunters per day. The Northbrook hunt had several parcels totaling 1,000 acres, allowing 50 hunters per day. Insurance concerns ended the hunt after 5 years.
One year, the township of Pelee Island Pheasant Farm ran out of pheasants for their annual pheasant hunt. Flintshire was contracted to deliver 1,000 birds. It was a long drive and ferry ride from Flinton to Pelee Island, and a long ride for the birds too. Another time, a private golf club in Toronto ordered some pheasants for live release on the golf course for a unique golf experience. Over the years, we could see a decline in game bird hunting. The Ministry of Natural Resources was constantly cutting back on their purchasing. We saw that the future was growing pheasants for the gourmet food trade.
Flintshire Farms was an integrated operation. We did everything from start to finish on the farm. We had a breeder flock, we hatched the chicks, we grew, processed, and marketed the birds. So the farm operated year-round, but we offered employment to the staff on a seasonal basis. And farm staff were hired back in the spring when the breeder flock started to lay eggs. Our daughter Sarah became a key part of the operation from a young age, collecting eggs, helping in the hatchery, and even in the processing plant. In the beginning, she needed to stand on a milk crate to reach the processing line. Sarah really liked working with the staff on the farm and in the plant. In the 1990s, we got a border collie. We named him Rudy, and I trained him to herd pheasants. And he would work tirelessly with farm staff. He was invaluable, and he loved it. Processing started for pheasants in September and continued until December. In the winter, there were often expansion projects for clearing more land and making more flight pens. The farm manager and plant manager were pivotal roles with significant responsibilities. The longest serving were Gord Scott, farm manager, and Phyllis Johnson, plant manager.
To provide more employment, we started to do some custom processing. This included processing of chickens, wild turkeys, and even pigeons. And the problem was, with the huge variety and sizes of the birds, equipment couldn't handle it, especially from a pigeon to a large wild turkey. And there was also the danger of bringing on a disease onto our farm and into our own flocks. In the 1990s, custom processing of Pintel guinea fowl and Roth Farms organic chicken became a big part of the business. We required a lot more staff, and during the peak years, 40 staff or more were on the payroll between the farm and the plant. Staff came and went as more full-time jobs became available for them, but they were always welcome back. It was not uncommon for several members of the same family to work together either on the farm or in the processing plant. Examples would be Gail Newton and her family, Terry, Tracy, Troy, and Tammy, or Elsie Delier and her family, Kathy, Christine, and Doug, or Fred and Gail Breyer with their children Jeremy and Paul, or Linda Forbes with her children Lori and Susan.
With the new federal processing plant on the horizon, the time was right to incorporate. Incorporation opened more opportunities, including participation in federal trade missions to the U.S. and other countries to meet with distributors and buyers. Everything in the Hook's long-term goal pointed to building a federally inspected processing plant, the highest level of inspection in Canada. There was a significant cost difference between provincial and federal inspections. The processing plant required considerable expansion, including a refrigerated packaging room, a cooled offal room, larger freezers, an inspector's office and shower, a large receiving garage, and numerous other modifications. Over the course of 2 years of planning and reconstruction, the provincial plant was upgraded to Federal Plant Number 17. Federal poultry plants are highly regulated. A veterinarian and inspector are assigned to each plant and must inspect every bird. Temperature testing and product tracking are mandatory with extensive paperwork. The new processing plant enabled Flintshire to capture export markets.
Throughout the operation of the farm, Cathy was the office. She did the payroll, payables and receivables, shipping and inventory control, and later on all the export documents, in addition to working on the farm. I initially did all the sales, visiting the food service distributors and restaurants in the US and Canada, and later on in Japan. In 1988, Flintshire was approached by a company out of Toronto called Pintel. This was a new guinea fowl company that was looking to break into the specialty food market. Pintel was looking for a federal processor and find one that was a good fit for their company. Their market was New York City. They had a main customer there called D'Artagnan who would service the white tablecloth restaurants. And each week, Pintel would load up their product from our plant and drive their dedicated truck to New York City with fresh product. As their product grew in popularity in Canada, they increased their flock size to about 4,400 a week. That would be all processed in a single day, and we increased our production speed up to 400 birds an hour. It was a suitable arrangement for many years until we discovered Pintel was targeting pheasant as a direct competitor. We learned a lot about marketing from Pintel, but in the end we needed to part ways. We learned that Pintel folded operations about a year later after they left Flintshire.
As sales grew, so did our hatchery, with capacity doubling in the 1990s. We added an addition onto the hatchery to accommodate a new incubator and hatcher. This time we chose the Nature Farm brand manufactured in Florida. It had the same capacity as the Robbins incubator, 21,000 eggs. In our peak years, we picked up 80,000 eggs per year, all by hand.
The Flintshire staff did an exceptional job processing small poultry. Looking to expand in other directions, Flintshire purchased chicken quota. Cornish chicken was popular year-round in restaurants and grocery stores. Flintshire built a new barn on the Flinton Road designed for growing 2,000 Cornish per week. The barn had automatic feeding, watering, and climate control. Main customers included the Loblaws grocery chain and Movenpick Marché in Toronto. Movenpick had just opened an exclusive market-style restaurant in Toronto that featured rotisserie chicken. In the end, battles with the Ontario Chicken Marketing Board were a major headache. In times when there was too much supply of regular chicken in the market, all quota holders were faced with mandatory cutbacks in production. Flintshire had a steady demand for Cornish, even when there was oversupply in regular chicken. To maintain customer agreements, Flintshire was forced to pay penalties to the marketing board. Frustrated, Flintshire sold the quota and focused on its core pheasant business.
One of our most successful products was pheasant stuffed quail. We purchased deboned quail from Nipissing Game Farm in North Bay. The quail were stuffed with a mixture of ground pheasant meat with a Provençal seasoning and capers. Each was vacuum packed in an oven-ready tin, and it was popular as a banquet item for restaurants, requiring very little preparation. An equally successful product was our pheasant pies. Individual 3-inch pies were prepared with a pheasant breast meat filling. Individually packaged and frozen, it was a nice luncheon item, and it was also popular for wedding parties, a unique item.
Pheasant gift boxes, aimed at the holiday market, remained popular through our 26 years in business. The product evolved over the years from a box manufactured by Patterson Lumber with a glass lid, pheasant under glass, to a slatted wooden crate, to a full-color cardboard box designed for Costco. The Costco product was sold in Canada and in select U.S. Costco outlets during the holiday season. Ringneck pheasants are dark-feathered. The pigment in the feathers sometimes remained in the skin of the pheasant during the feather plucking process, resembling an ink spot. In clear packaging, it would look imperfect to consumers used to seeing clean white poultry. When you think about it, all commercial poultry flocks today are white-feathered: chicken, turkey, ducks, and geese, because of similar pigment concerns. Flintshire developed a white pheasant for a premium look. White pigmented pheasants were selectively bred back into their flock until they had produced a pure white flock. These birds would solidify the Flintshire brand as the premium pheasant. For a couple of years, Flintshire exported day-old white pheasants. An article in World Poultry magazine created interest in the white pheasant from Europe and the Middle East. Boxes of chicks were driven to the airport and shipped to Germany, Kuwait, and other countries. Realizing that these countries might eventually compete with them in the pheasant meat export market, Flintshire discontinued the sale of Flintshire white chicks.
Farming is about numbers. We simply had to raise more birds. With federal inspection, we could sell coast to coast. So we set up a network of distributors based in Vancouver, Calgary, Winnipeg, Toronto, Ottawa, and Montreal to serve the Canadian market. Customers included major hotels with white tablecloth restaurants such as the Chateau Laurier in Ottawa, the Royal York, and the Four Seasons in Toronto. Smaller restaurants were excellent customers too, including the General Wolfe Hotel on Wolfe Island, where pheasant was the specialty of the house, and the River Mill restaurant in Kingston. Before the internet, reaching out to customers could only be done in person, by mail, or by telephone. We decided we needed a marketing video, so we hired a Kingston company to create one for us. At the time, standard definition was the only option on VCR tapes, but we found it was a good way to advertise our product. Here's the video and the quality at the time.
In an increasingly competitive poultry market, buyers know the importance of providing health-conscious consumers with a high-quality, low-fat product. Pheasant, low in calories and high in protein, is today becoming a healthy alternative to more traditional meats and poultry. Since 1977, Flintshire Farms, located in beautiful Flinton, Ontario, Canada, has responded to the demand for high-quality poultry by producing some of the finest free-ranged pheasants available in the world today. Flintshire Farms is a totally integrated pheasant operation, consisting of large, free-ranged pheasant flocks, a government-registered hatchery, and a federally inspected processing plant. Over the years, Flintshire has grown to become Canada's premier supplier of pheasants to the meat industry. At the core of Flintshire Farms' success is its free-range method of pheasant production. Unlike some growers who barn-raise their pheasants, Flintshire Farms raises its pheasants in large outdoor flight pens, which allow growing birds an average of 25 square feet each, and breeding birds over 50 square feet each. This is important because when pheasants are allowed to exercise their wings, they develop large, tender breasts, unsurpassed by other fowl. Under the clear blue skies of eastern Ontario, Flintshire Farms pheasants graze freely on an all-natural, chemical-free diet, consisting of oats, barley, sunflower, and canola. The result of this natural process is the distinctive wild game flavor that makes our birds famous. Over the course of a 12-year selective breeding program, Flintshire Farms has developed two specialized strains of ringneck pheasant. The Flintshire ringneck was developed to be a quality hunting bird, large in size and a powerful flyer. When processed at 18 weeks, males dress out at 3 pounds and hens at 2 pounds. The Flintshire white pheasant is unique in that it is totally white feathered. What this means is that the bird can be processed without any spots on the skin, allowing the consumer to enjoy a cleaner, more consistent, more attractive product. The Flintshire white is also a faster maturing, larger breasted, easier to process bird, and has a dressed weight of 3¼ pounds for males and 2¼ for females. The result of Flintshire Farms' all-natural methods is a product high in protein and low in calories and cholesterol-producing fat compared to other meats and fowl. Boasting only 151 calories per portion, pheasant compares favorably with chicken, 239, duck, 326, quail, 168, and Cornish hen, 298. In protein content, it is second only to quail, at 24.3 grams per 100 grams of meat. Pheasant is a logical choice for the health-conscious consumer. Flintshire Farms prides itself on the care with which it processes and packages its products. Government inspectors are on site continuously during operation to monitor the quality of the products and the conditions of the facilities. A high level of sanitation is mandatory in the processing plant, and everyone involved is required to meet the rigorous standards set out by the federal inspector. Only after the condition of all rooms and equipment has been inspected and approved may actual processing begin. During processing, every pheasant undergoes close scrutiny, and those that do not meet the expectations of the inspector are rejected. Flintshire Farms is experienced in packaging products for the Japanese market. Because of the requirements of this market, the head and feet must be left on the birds so that they are readily identifiable as pheasants. The birds are then wrapped to the specifications of the wholesalers to meet the needs of the Japanese market. It should be emphasized that the birds processed for Japan are put through the same rigorous inspection process as those bound for domestic markets.
The Ontario government once helped exporters sell their products in select markets. The program was successful as it introduced suppliers to customers. Ontario trade missions were beneficial in finding distributors for Canadian products. Flintshire took advantage of this opportunity in Washington, D.C., New York City, and Los Angeles.
In the late 1990s, we were contacted by a gentleman by the name of Cliff Tatro, who lived in Las Vegas. Cliff was a salesperson for King Cole Ducks out of Aurora, Ontario. And Cliff suggested when he's visiting restaurants and large food service distributors selling ducks, he could be selling our pheasant as well. So we struck up a really good relationship with Cliff.
On Cliff's advice, the Hooks hired a food stylist and photographer in Toronto and produced sell sheets for the U.S. market. Sell sheets enabled Cliff to professionally present the Flintshire product line. The partnership was highly successful. In short order, Cliff received orders from Costco and grocery chains such as Albertsons and Whole Foods for a holiday item.
Adopting HACCP, Hazard Analysis and Critical Control Points, was a certification earned through the Canadian Food Inspection Agency. Ken and I took training in 1997 and started working on the HACCP plan. Flintshire was one of the early adopters of the plan in Canada, and it gave us a sales advantage. Staff from the Guelph Food Technology Centre were invited to the Lions Hall in Northbrook to train all of our employees. Phyllis Johnson, our plant manager, eventually took over the plan's completion and implementation.
The Japanese green pheasant is endemic to Japan. The pheasant appears in Japanese legends and is the national bird. The green pheasant was featured on the reverse side of the 10,000 yen note from 1984 to 2007. Pheasant had been eaten by nobility since ancient times. By the 1980s, it was becoming more widely consumed as a gourmet food. Tartan Farms of Winnipeg was a major customer of Flintshire with contracts in Japan, selling to Yamaoka, a distributor to exclusive Japanese restaurants. It wasn't long before Flintshire was contracted by another distributor, Toma Shoji. Unlike North American markets, leg meat is preferred to breast meat in Japan. Flintshire needed to learn how to debone pheasant legs, which proved difficult due to the 7 tendons. While in Japan, the distributors tried to train Ken to debone pheasant legs. Toma Shoji decided to photograph the process and traveled to Flinton to train Flintshire staff. Ken attended the Foodex trade show in Tokyo in the Canadian Pavilion, one of the world's largest food shows. A Japanese translator assisted Ken in the booth. In addition to Tokyo, the Canadian contingent of food companies also exhibited in Osaka and Fukuoka for 3 weeks. Within a few years, Flintshire was supplying 70% of its production to the Japanese market, outselling companies from Brazil and France. Some shipments to Japan were flown from Toronto to Tokyo. However, most shipments were by sea container. Freezer containers were picked up at Flintshire and traveled by truck to Toronto, then by rail to Vancouver, and finally by sea to Japan. As the Flintshire brand became known, several high-profile sales occurred. Flintshire pheasant was served to Prince Philip at the Royal Winter Fair. On October 8, 2002, Queen Elizabeth was treated to Flintshire smoked pheasant at the Legislative Buildings in Winnipeg as part of her Golden Jubilee Tour of Canada. And former Prime Minister Jean Chrétien routinely enjoyed Flintshire pheasant at 24 Sussex Drive in Ottawa, purchased from the Glebe Meat Market on Bank Street. In 1999, Flintshire Farms Inc. received honorable mention for the Ontario Global Traders Award in Ottawa and was also named Exporter of the Year by Lennox and Addington County.
I'm not a pheasant plucker, I'm a pheasant plucker's son, and I'm sitting plucking pheasants till the pheasant plucker comes. Birds are flying overhead most of the day, have to find a target just the ordinary way. I'm not a pheasant plucker, I'm a pheasant plucker's son, and I'm sitting plucking pheasants till the pheasant plucker comes. I'm a pheasant plucker's son, and I'm sitting plucking pheasants till the pheasant plucker comes. I'm not a pheasant plucker, I'm a pheasant plucker's son, and I'm sitting plucking pheasants till the